The wind howled through the skeletal trees of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, carrying with it whispers of a warning long forgotten. On the edge of town, near the ruins of the old TNT factory, a lone truck driver, Daniel Carter, pulled his rig over to the side of the road, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled hands. His heart pounded against his ribs as his headlights reflected something unnatural, a pair of glowing red eyes staring at him from the darkness. His breath hitched. And then, wings. Massive, leathery wings. Before he could scream, the creature lunged toward the windshield. Daniel had always believed in hard work, not in urban legends. He had grown up listening to his grandmother's stories about the Mothman, but he dismissed them as folklore meant to scare children into obedience. He was a man of logic, a father of 2 beautiful daughters, and a husband to a woman who had pulled him out of his darkest days. Life had finally given him a break after years of struggle. He had promised his family a better future, one where they didn't have to worry about the next meal or an eviction notice on their door. But that night, as he sat frozen in his truck, he felt something deeper than fear. He felt dread, the kind that grips a man's soul before the inevitable. Without warning, the windshield shattered, glass exploding into the cab as the shadowy figure crashed into him. Daniel screamed, his hands scrambling for the door handle as the creature's wings enveloped the truck's cabin. A piercing shriek echoed through the night, an unholy sound that made his eardrums feel like they were about to burst. Then, in the midst of the chaos, he saw its face. 2 burning red eyes, sunken into a monstrous humanoid form. Its mouth twisted into something neither a snarl nor a grin, its black, skeletal body towering over him. Before he could react, the creature's clawed hand reached into the truck and grabbed him. A jolt of unimaginable pain shot through his chest, as if his heart was being crushed from the inside. And just like that, everything went black. Daniel woke up on the cold pavement, his body aching, his mind struggling to piece together what had happened. His truck was gone, no shattered glass, no signs of struggle, as if he had never been there. But the worst was yet to come. Dazed and terrified, he stumbled back into town, seeking comfort in the warmth of his home, the embrace of his wife and children. But as he turned the corner to his street, his breath caught in his throat. His house was in flames. The fire had engulfed the entire structure, a monstrous inferno painting the sky in shades of hell. Daniel's knees buckled as he heard the screams, his wife, his daughters. His heart shattered. He ran toward the house, blinded by tears, his body screaming in agony, but strong hands held him back. "No, my family. I have to save them," he screamed, fighting against the arms restraining him, but deep down, he already knew. As the fire department worked tirelessly to extinguish the flames, Daniel stood in numb silence, his world crumbling around him. That's when he noticed it. The shadow perched atop a telephone pole across the street. The same glowing red eyes, watching, waiting. And then the flames shifted. For a brief moment, the inferno twisted into a shape, wings, a figure inside the fire, and just as quickly it vanished. A cold realization settled into his bones. This wasn't an accident, it was a warning, a premonition come true. His family had been taken because he saw the Mothman. The days blurred together. The authorities claimed it was an electrical fire. No foul play, no suspicious activity, but Daniel knew better. Then the nightmare started. Each night he found himself back on the road, back in the truck, staring into those glowing red eyes. And every time he woke, there would be a single word scratched into the walls of his motel room. Silver. The motel room was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the nightstand. Daniel Carter sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the message etched into the wall with deep, jagged scratches. Silver. His breath felt heavy, his body drained, but he couldn't ignore the feeling crawling up his spine. Someone, or something, had left him this warning. The Mothman wasn't done with him yet. Then, the air in the room shifted. A cold presence pressed against his chest, and for the first time since his family's death, he heard a voice he thought he'd never hear again. A whisper. "Run, Danny, before it takes you too." His wife's voice. And then a shadow moved in the mirror. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. That his wife's voice had always been his anchor, the warmth in his darkest days. And now, even in death, she was reaching out to him. His fingers trembled as he touched the mirror, longing for something, anything that could bring her back. Emily? His voice cracked, barely a whisper, but the only response was the ticking clock, growing louder, more insistent, like a countdown. He fell to his knees, grief gripping his chest like a vice. They were gone. His wife, his daughters, and no amount of wishing or praying could change that. But one thing was clear. They had tried to warn him. A sudden bang echoed from the bathroom. The door slammed shut on its own. The lights flickered violently, casting shifting shadows across the room. And then he saw it. The reflection in the mirror, not his own. A dark, towering figure with massive wings stretched wide, crimson eyes staring directly into his soul. Daniel scrambled backward as the room shook, the walls cracking as if something monstrous was pressing in from the outside. The mirror shattered, shards flying across the room like daggers. He covered his head, but before the glass hit the ground, everything went silent. And then he heard it. Silver Bridge. Not from the Mothman, from his wife's voice. A cold wave of fear crawled through his veins. The Silver Bridge, and then the television turned on by itself. A news broadcast flickered on the screen. A warning. Authorities report structural concerns about the Silver Bridge. Engineers are assessing. The screen glitched violently, distorting into static. Then, a single horrifying image appeared. The bridge collapsing, cars plunging into the river, screams, bodies sinking beneath the current. But it wasn't just a random disaster scene. It hadn't happened yet. It was about to. Daniel's chest heaved as he clutched his head. He knew what this meant. It was a warning. Just like his family, the Mothman had appeared to him before the fire, before his entire life had been ripped away, and now it was happening again, but to someone else. If he didn't do something, more people would die. Families would be destroyed. Children would be orphaned, just like his daughters should have been. If only they had lived long enough. The weight of it all crushed him. His family hadn't been spared. And now he was expected to stop another disaster. Tears burned his eyes. "Why me?" he whispered, his voice breaking. But the only response was the news broadcast flickering back to life. Authorities estimate the Silver Bridge will be full of commuters during peak hours tomorrow. Tomorrow. He had less than a day. His hands trembled as he grabbed his keys. He didn't know if the police would believe him. He didn't know if anyone would. But he had to try. He threw open the motel door and froze. Standing at the edge of the parking lot, directly beneath the flickering streetlight, was the Mothman. Its glowing red eyes bore into him, unblinking as its massive wings slowly unfolded, stretching as if preparing to take flight. Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. It wasn't attacking him. It was waiting, and then before he could blink, it lifted off the ground, soaring into the sky with an unearthly screech. Daniel stumbled backward, his mind reeling. He had spent his whole life running from nightmares, but now his nightmare was leading him somewhere. He knew what he had to do. Follow it.